Good morning, buenos dias, and welcome back to AR Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Mirabal. Ding 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 boom boom, ding 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 boom. As always, this podcast is brought to you by One Audio. Power of music, you gotta buy the gear to use it. Hey, go to checkout. Use code special AR SPECIALAR. Get some discounts on some really great audio equipment. I use it every day. Really great stuff too, honestly. Pretty decently like noise canceling. The one I have is both Bluetooth and wired. I obviously use it wired for the just to ensure the quality, Great stuff, honestly. I'm using my Buddha mug today. Uh-oh. Means I'm getting trippy this episode. Just some news to get right out the way. Today, we are recording our third group cast. I am honestly geeked over it. We have some really great authors coming back. I actually have, if I were to number it, we have our first guest, our third guest, and some more recent guests coming back. So we have both the newer authors coming back as well as some older ones, which is just going to be awesome. Seymour Zainali for Blood and Iron or Blood and Thunder. Sorry, Blood and Iron actually is what it is. I'm sorry. That gritty fantasy that we talked about in the third episode. Awesome. To this day, he still holds the record for the longest episode. We recorded 5 or so hours and only put up like 3.5 or something like that. It was insane. Then we have Sam Animato coming back. The man, he is easily the most featured guest on this podcast. He's come back multiple times. I even have a third episode already recorded, a third solo episode already recorded for him that I haven't even released yet. And then we have Adam Gaffin. He has been a tried and true featured player in the group cast so far. He's with tonight's episode, he will be 3 out of 3 for featured guest, which is awesome. And then we have P.L. Stewart, the man, the myth, the legend, coming back. The author of A Drowned Kingdom and just a true treasured friend. He's one of the people that has beta read Allegory of the End, and the reviews that he's given on it are just warms your heart. Great guy. Cannot speak to everybody today. It is going to be phenomenal. There actually are a couple things I want to talk about today, which is ironic that I have the Buddha mug today. I'll even give it a nice little pass. Hey, who's that? Is that Siddhartha? No. Siddhartha Gautama Siddhartha. Is that the prince right here? Man, talk about commercialism though, huh? We took such a noble figure, something so transcending to the human experience, and we literally casted his face in clay, cut the top of his head off, right? Which is basically where all of the brain in Nirvana lives, and then filled it. And now I drink my tea out of it, and sometimes coffee. And now I'm drinking it with 2 hands for reasons unknown. But there actually are 2 things that I want to talk about today, even though it does seem I'm going everywhere and left and right. Specifically, I wanted to talk about genres and I wanted to talk about youth. I know they don't seem like things that really go together at all. And really they don't, but I'll find some bullshit way to tie it all together at the end of the episode, knowing me. So for genres, and it's something that has been really, I've thought about it often, especially with gearing up for the beta readers. I have just of lately, I've sent my book out to I don't even know, 20 or so beta readers and have easily 50 or 60 so ready for the actual ready to beta release it when I have the actual proof ready on the first week of May. So that is just going to be, I mean, just that has getting my whole mind really just racing with the whole idea of genres, because there's a whole bunch of people that ask me, like, all right, well, what genre is it? And if you're new to the podcast, or if you've been listening on and I just haven't explained myself that well, I've had a real tough time, and still to this day, with finding what the genre is of my book. I mean, it has just so many weird elements into it. And the thing is that I didn't have an idea for a genre when I was writing. I just wrote it. And truly, and it's what I want to talk about today, I think great writing doesn't have a specific genre to it. You know, you have Frankenstein, which is a horror. You know, Mary Shelley specifically said that her inspiration for it, the emotion that she wanted other people to feel when they read her work, was the same emotions that she felt when she read the paranormal uh stories of her youth, that she read with her and her friends and her husband, and the Nordic folk tales and all the different things that she heard, that she said that the feelings that those authors convey, that those writers conveyed in those books of existential dread and just like sheer horror, is what she wanted to give with the idea of Frankenstein, right? Because the whole idea of bringing somebody back, it's almost it's far-fetched but believable, which is kind of what she wanted to go with. Like, I really know what she wanted to go with, just assuming from what she had written in just her own accounts from the introduction and just different articles that I've read of her. And you look at that book now, and I mean, I don't really think it has a genre. I think its genre is classical literature. It's literature. You just read it and it's just awesome shit. It has no genre. I mean, even the horror elements of it are kind of waned because she's introduced the idea of a Frankenstein. So by the time you're born in this generation, thanks to Scooby-Doo episodes, or, random cartoons making like their own little pokes and jabs at it, you know very well what Frankenstein is before you ever know who Mary Shelley is. Years before you even know who Mary Shelley is. I mean, my God, I knew about Frankenstein like year one moving to America. Year one. The moment I came into consciousness and started speaking English, the idea of Frankenstein popped into my head through cartoons, through other people. It's just a common trope that Mary Shelley introduced, really, which is what makes her writing last so long, that she introduced a new concept, not just a new writing format, not just a new way of diction and articulating her words and her thoughts, but a new concept, which is really kind of like the heart of what I think is really propels great writing, specifically writing tied to like science. Because if you ask me, Frankenstein is a sci-fi horror, dark sci-fi, if you want to think about it like that. I mean, the entire story revolves around galvanization, the science fiction of being able to bring somebody back to life, to reanimate them. And she specifically uses that terminology of reanimate because she's alluding to the whole Paradise Lost thing, and even the subtitle of the book itself, Frankenstein, a modern Prometheus. Prometheus being the god that gave fire to humans, but then ultimately got cast out of Olympus and was tortured for eternity by Zeus, by having a hawk, which is a symbol of Zeus, eat at his pancreas every day, and his pancreas would regrow every day. But then a hawk would come by and be like, "Hey, motherfucker, what's up? Give me that pancreas." And homeboy would just get his pancreas eaten by a hawk every single day for eternity, for giving humans fire, for giving us that initial thing. And in a sense, Frankenstein being the doctor, not the monster, which we refer to as Frankenstein. But Victor Frankenstein is basically the Prometheus. He gave us that reanimation clause. He brought that back. But then the fire that he got, his torture was actually creating the beast, understanding the limitations of what he's done. And to me, I mean, that is sci-fi by definition. But that could be argued either way, right? You look at something like even Harry Potter. Harry Potter is, I would say, magic-based fantasy, if somebody were to just categorize it off the top. But really, I would argue that even that is sci-fi fantasy. If you just switch the mentality of magic from being this magical, fantastical substance to being a technology based off the wand, right? Because the whole use of magic is based on the wand. So it could be kind of stretched to believe that the wand is the technology they use, and then higher usings of it and casting of spells is just programming basically in order to get the certain code that you want out of the wand. You can go either way with it. Genres don't matter shit to me, but evidently they matter a lot to a lot of other people. So that's kind of why I want to talk about it today. That's why I have my Buddha mug, to get a little philosophical about it, right? Because I think it is a very interesting like concept and thought. Because I've met a lot of people. Well, I can't say a lot of people. I think I've met out of like, I don't even know, 75 to 100 people that I've asked and fielded for beta readers. I think 2 or 3 have just responded off the bat, just like, oh yeah, I don't really read sci-fi. But then I go on their posts and like a lot of their work are things that to me are sci-fi. They have their Harry Potters, they have their Hunger Games. I have one person that they said that they don't read sci-fi, and I said, oh, but you have Hunger Games on there, and he goes like, oh, I thought that was dystopian, and I just lost my mind right there. I'm like, wait a minute, dystopian is a subsect of science fiction, is it not? It's crazy how people like do this mental gymnastic to say like, oh no, I like this, but I don't like that. But what are you talking about? One of my favorite shows ever is Breaking Bad. What the fuck is the genre of that? What, urban fiction mixed with like drug rehabilitation and drug distribution and character development in New Mexico? Who the fuck cares? You think I would have watched that show if somebody just gave me that description? If somebody just gave me the genre, I was like, oh yeah, it's an urban fiction and they sell blue meth. I'd be like, okay, gives a fuck. It's the writing, it's the plot, the characters that have been developed that draw you to it. I don't think that is really based on any genre. And I think it's crazy that people kind of like, oh no, I like this, but I don't like that. And I guess in that same sense, I'm kind of shitting on myself because I used to talk all this shit about like other genres. I'm not gonna, like romance and erotica and what like things like that. But in reality, it's just based on writing, right? Interesting how it goes. Because I guess if I were to play like my devil's advocate and kind of defend the other side, would be that the thing that turned me off about romance and erotica would be that I would read passages of it from people that I guess were as gifted with it in the genre or gifted at writing. And I would read that work and I'd be like, yeah, this is trash. And then it's probably the same thing of people that picked up a sci-fi book one day that was categorical sci-fi, quote unquote, and they read it and that shit was trash. And now they were just like, oh yes, this is what sci-fis are. They're just overly contrived and have all these crazy references of technologies that I don't understand and all these things. And why would I want to read that? Same thing for me in romance. Like, oh, this is just basically written porn. Why would I want to read this? But it's all depending on the writing, right? So as with everything, I thought I was really had a really good point, but as always, I'm just in the middle. What can you do, huh? Although I still think it's a very interesting thing, just all through and through, really. Because I just thinking back on it, I can't tell you. I mean, even sci-fi itself. Like I was born a sci-fi writer / fan. Of course not. I picked up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I picked up, Ender's Game. I picked up. Oh, excuse me. Had a little itch there. I picked up Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, I believe is his name. You have The Son of Neptune, which is honestly, I would actually say, I don't think an argument can really be made for sci-fi with that. I would say that's more historical fiction and fantasy for sure. But that doesn't stop me from being a huge fan of it. And really, the fantastical elements of it are a huge inspiration and motivation for my writing today. I will geek out like a schoolgirl getting ice cream for the first time. When I'm able to speak to Rick Riordan about just his craft and everything. And if I were to have be able to somehow talk, have a seance and talk to Philip K. Dick, oh my god, the things I'd be able to pick from that mind and just everything, the Rendezvous or Ramadan, just like all the different stories that he had, the short stories, and just again, the home of it wasn't the thing that pulled me in wasn't the science fiction, it was his writing. I mean, there was one time that I wrote, and I'm not a nonfiction fan by anything, but there was one time that I read a short story that was actually a almost biographical nonfiction story that he wrote about how he was at a dinner one time that had a whole bunch of heads of states in London, and it had, prime ministers and delegates from United States and all these different, power figures around him. And he was actually invited because there was a communications convention. And he was invited because he had written so much science fiction at that time that actually helped inspire the communication leaps in technology that we had experienced in that year. I can't remember the year exactly. I want to say it was like the late 60s or something like that, maybe the early 70s. I can't remember too well. But his writing actually inspired the scientists to make the new innovations in communication that year. So he was invited to basically be a speaker and to get pick people's thoughts. And I can't tell you how just gripping that writing was. It just him speaking about his own life, him being at a dinner and talking to a few delegates. The writing of that was phenomenal. That right there is what shows you is just there's a lot of things that propel you in this industry, and really the home of it. And I know it seems kind of like odd. Well, it seems kind of obvious of it, but really the home of it is just the writing. We really focus so much on 1,000 different things. The cover has to be just right, the things have to be just this, and those elements definitely sell a book. I'm not saying they don't get that twisted, but at the end of the day, talent is talent, or at least I hope it is, right? Because you do have to tip the hat that the time that he was being published, that was the time that you had to be published. You had to have another group of adults come up and say, hey, you know what, bucko, good job, come with us, we'll give you a couple of racks, we'll get you started. And that also means that that's not just a positive. That also means there's a group of adults going through your work and being, you know what, I like this part, but this part, maybe that could drip a couple of our sales, so let's take that off. And you have to, as a confident author yourself that may or may not have prior experience with a publisher, with a group of adults tearing through your shit, you have to sit there and fight back, within reason. You can't keep everything, but you have to stand your ground. Like, oh no, I believe in this chapter, and you have to do that. And he was able to do that at a time that there was no self-publishing ventures to be done. Well, you could, but you would be selling, you'd be going to a local printing press and selling to a couple people around your neighborhood, maybe a few friends. Nothing like Amazon. So, especially with all the books being published, I guess there's a whole bunch of different elements, but truly talent is talent. You really have to work on the craft over everything. That's why I think that genres are just kind of like a weird concept. I think it helps people in order to kind of define things. If I were to be honest, the only genres that really matter to me are like serious drama versus comedy. And even then, there's a lot of things that meld that bridge by a lot. You have Maniac, genius show on Netflix. You haven't seen that? It's just on another level. It has Jonah Hill and Emma Stone, phenomenal. It also has Justin Theroux and Sally Fields, I believe is her name. Whole bunch of great just actors and just great characters, great plots, and just so many ups and downs, and the comedic value, like the amount of times that you'll laugh hysterically and then 3 seconds later just feel gutted and just uh heartbroken are just almost too many in that show. It's perfectly written. And again, it just goes in between, like, for a person, I would love for a person to give me a genre on that show. What the hell is a genre on that show? It could be sci-fi, it could be speculative fiction, it could be you know, existential dread, it can be existential horror. I mean, it goes through all those things. You know what I mean? How do you categorize that? And in that same sense, how do you categorize anything that you don't specifically go out to categorize? I understand it's pretty easy when an author sits back and go like, all right, I want to make a sci-fi fantasy that has LGBTQ representation and this and that and this and that, and then you start writing. But what if you just write? What if you have an idea and then you just write and you don't think about genre? How do you then classify that? How do you then put that in a genre? There's not like a software. Amazon doesn't have like a .com little app thing that you can just put your manuscript through and then beam boom bam bam bam, you have a speculative fiction with erotica fantasies. Doesn't work. You as an author just have to sit back and like do that. And I know I've kind of said this before, but again, it's just a thing, especially with the beta readers. There's kind of was resurfacing all those thoughts. But again, it's just so odd for a person and to be fair to the people that if people that are listening, if the people that are listening are also the people that have done me the pleasure, the service of doing this beta reading for me, not all of them have been like that. I would say a good majority, at least 75%, have just said yes right off the bat. She's like, oh yeah, cool, that sounds awesome, which is great. God bless them. But I guess my more, I guess how my paranoid mind works is just I can't focus on the 95% that's positive. I have to focus on the 5% that I can try to fix. And it's just weird because it seems like an unfixable problem. How can you convince a person that a genre that they dislike isn't really a genre that they dislike? I was able to convince one person, actually. I will say that. I do have one victory in this. That I made that Harry Potter claim, the same thing. It's like, oh, well, you read Harry Potter, and Harry Potter is really just this and that. And they were like, oh, you know what? That actually is a pretty good point. And then we kind of talked about that just for a little bit. And it's actually a great because we just were able to kind of chit chat instead of making it kind of an official thing of like me asking a professional opinion out of my professional work. We were actually just able to chit chat and talk about writing and whatnot. And then at the end of it, it was like, yeah, I would, love to read your work. And again, I think that's the home. I think that's the reason why I think these interviews and these podcasts are so important, because when you understand the writer and what they're trying to do, I think it trumps any idea of a genre or a synopsis or a summary that anybody can give. Just the true emotion, the passion that a person exuberates and exhumes when they speak about the project, I think speaks miles and miles and miles and miles, and way more indicative of what their work is going to be than, oh, it's a sci-fi with dystopian elements. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Now, for the second thing that I want to talk about, and of course I ran the gambit as always, but we'll make it short. What I want to talk about is just youth. It's something that I've been thinking about with the writing for Allegory of the End, Volume 2. And it's just an interesting concept of growing up all together. And I think that the age in which this happens is not only diminishing, it's always been diminished, right? So, and I'll start it off by quoting Dave Chappelle's genius stand-up, Killing Them Softly. What is 15 really? So you have, back in the day, Game of Thrones is based around the War of Roses, which was the periods of, like, I don't know, I think it was like the 15 or 1600s in England. So in that time frame, and again, outside of the zombies and all the fantastical elements of it, it was pretty indicative of the time frame at the time. You know, George did his research. So you have the main characters of Jon Snow, of Khaleesi. They're both 15, 16. They're young. Now, the reason I think he did this was to be indicative. At that time, young wasn't young. You know, you were married off at 14. You were doing shit by like 8. You know, you were a fixture in your family by 10. Things were just different. You were an adult faster, and that was due, I think, to just the lifespan at the time. I mean, if you made it to 30 or 40, that wasn't a bad gig back then. So it makes sense that, you know, if you were to scale it, that by 10, 12, you would have to be an adult in order just to accommodate things, because, you know, people are dying off earlier, there's less people, there's more work that has to be done, and that share has to be divided up onto you a little bit more. Understandable. Now, that shifts a little bit when we start introducing advances in medical technologies and all these different things to help expand the lifespan. You know, there's more knowledge of nutrition, more everything. You know, people are living longer. So now we have, now I think the average lifespan is like what, 77? I think it's like 75 for men, 78 for women, I think. So you have that huge gap of life expectancy increase. And I think in accordance to that, you kind of had the society scale also rised up, right? 12 isn't no longer 12 how it used to be. 12 is a kid. And you don't become legally an adult until 18 now, which was, you know, probably a 6-year difference back then. So what is interesting to me, and what I want to kind of talk about the, you know, philosophical sense, why I got my Buddha mug today, right? Is while the laws and the societal aspect of it shifted, for whatever reason, I think the kind of mentality didn't. I can't tell you how many children I see. Well, you know, children, it's funny that I say it like that, but I can't tell you how many high schoolers and teenagers I see that are so obsessed with being older. And I can't tell you when I was that age, how obsessed I was with getting older and all the people around me with getting older. And I guess it's just a bitter beauty of life, that catch-22 of life, that you don't understand how precious your youth is until you no longer have it. You know, like for whatever reason, the moment that you turn a certain age, all you want to do is kind of like skip over all those, you know, BS kid years in order to get to the adult shit that you think is like cooler. And the reason, of course, like psychologically, is because I think, you know, when you were 12 and you were a younger kid back in the day, you had a little more say. At least, if not say, people at least listened to you a little bit more because had a little bit, you know, you had responsibilities. Whereas now, when you're 12, you're 13, even if you have the mental capacity in order to have those thoughts, no one's listening to it because you're a kid. Simple as that. No matter how nuanced of an idea you have, no matter how personally intelligent, no matter how much you've meditated on a subject, no one outside of people that are your age are going to respect your thoughts or your opinion because you're a kid. And, you know, maybe that is a fault of society. But at the same time, it's like, knowing what I know, why would I listen to a 12-year-old? I thought I knew a lot of shit when I was 12. I thought I knew everything at fucking 12. What are we talking about? If I were to write down those things I knew, well, I thought I knew when I was 12, and I thought I understood when I was 12, and write them down, and even just compare them to when I was 16 or 17, I would have to burn them because it would be useless information. And that's just how it goes. You know, it's also the joke that Louis C.K. Said. It's like, listen, I don't care how smart you are. If you're 20 versus a 40-year-old, the 40-year-old person is smarter just because they've lived longer. When I was in my 20s and I heard that joke, I was slightly offended. I was like, hey, what do you know? You know, I'm mature for my age, and all that bullshit. It wasn't until I got to like 23 that I realized how smart he was. It really doesn't matter how smart you think you are or how idiotic you think the adults in your life are. They've just lived longer. They know more. I know it's like weird to like to like compare, especially when you're like, oh, but I have a degree in XYZ and they, you know, are doing XYZ. It's like, listen, it doesn't matter what they're doing. They've just lived longer. It's taken me so long to get to that point, but I'm telling you, it's just it's just an understanding of life, which is why youth is so interesting. And the reason I've been thinking about this, you have the character Zako, you know, when he's 16, 17, and he's done all the things that he's done, and he's had all the thoughts that he has now, he feels like he should be in power now. It's like, oh no, yeah, you know, I've done this, I've done the work. I need to be put into power now. And the people around him are like, yeah, we can't do that. I mean, with all the things that the world has been through with you know, all the conspiracies and all the things that have been brought to light, we can't now put the fate of the world to the head of a 17-year-old and expect everybody to be okay with this. That's not how it works. And just that emotion is what drives is part what kind of cracks Zako. You know, he's put all this work, all this emotion, all these thoughts into thing, and now he's just deadly frustrated because he has all these things that he knows, and well, at least thinks he knows, but just has no respect, even though he's done all the work. He you know, if it wasn't for him and his involvement, they wouldn't be where they're at. But just because of his age, he's being demoted, basically, and being shunned and being left out and being casted out in his eyes anyway. And I think that's just interesting because it's an emotion that I think that everybody can at once experience. And maybe you're that age when maybe you'll be that age when you're reading it, and maybe you yourself will be able to empathize with those thoughts. But I think it's something that everyone can also experience, that when they get just a little bit older, they realize how just silly that thought is, you know? It's the song, you know, the more I see, the less I know. You know, there are few songs that just get an existential thought so on the line with so few thoughts, with so few words, and still make it like a really catchy and beautiful song. And that has to take the cake, honestly. The more I see, the less I know, but I know one thing, that I love juice. Oh yeah, you know, whatever. But I mean, yeah, honestly. And you know, just how everything of that goes together, and it's just a really a great fuel for writing and everything, which is why it's almost interesting when people ask like, oh, is your writing you know, influenced by your own experiences? How the hell could you not write from your own experiences? Like, that's crazy. That's like saying, when you run, do you use your legs? It's like, I have to. I don't know how to. I mean, I guess you could run with your hands. That seems way more difficult than running with what you naturally have, you know, with what you're designed to run with. So that is going to be the end of the podcast. You already know, group cast tonight. I have 2 recordings tomorrow with phenomenal authors. Cannot wait for both of them. One of them is actually a fellow YouTuber slash podcaster. It's a group, a little duo that does book reviews and talks about the craft and invites authors and everything. Cannot wait for them. And then we have another author who I've just been vibing really well with. I cannot wait to get her on and speak to all of them. Really have a great couple of recordings coming up. Make sure to catch them. The group cast that's recorded tonight will be up on Friday, so make sure to catch that. And then on Monday, we will have a new episode out for you. And actually, the author that I have on Monday, ironically enough, with all the shit I've been talking, is a romance erotica author. And she is phenomenal. We had a great conversation. Make sure to tune into that. This is the end of the podcast. A.R.'s Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. Check with us on Friday, and check with us on Monday, and check with us on Wednesday for the Solocast. You already know how it is. Peace out.